Welcome back, everybody. My name's Tommy McCarthy. We are Cyber News Global, and this is Let's Talk Cyber. Well, what a guy we've got to introduce to you today. I've known this character for some years, and what a mine of information he is when it comes to cybersecurity. Kurtis Toy. He's the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Onca Technologies. He's also the Chief Executive Officer of the Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, which he's going to tell us a little bit about later on. But today we're going to talk a little bit about vCISO versus the CISO. But before we do, I'd like to welcome Kurtis Toy. Welcome, Kurtis, to Let's Talk Cyber.
Hi, Tommy. Thanks very much for having me.
Wonderful, Kurtis. Listen, give us a little bit of background about yourself, Kurtis, before we jump straight into this subject matter today. Who is Kurtis Toy and who is Onca?
So I'm Kurtis Toy, and I started out as, ironically, a biologist, and then I soon discovered that you had to turn the printer off and on to make it work. And working for an oil and gas servicing company, I got moved from data analytics, which I was doing for my previous degree, into IT. So that was about 15 years ago. And then since then, I started learning more about IT. And I think, ironically, my background in biology and scientific research and studies actually helped me with that. So I looked at it from a practical component and saw things that could be implemented and improved. Did it from kind of a project management point of view, and then quite quickly moved towards the kind of cybersecurity side of things, and then looked at how we could improve the kind of structure across the company to make it more cyber resilient.
So coming from an IT background, then, Kurtis, obviously that's where you cut your teeth, for want of a better word. You'd have obviously seen some of the challenges that IT departments have, and then obviously as cybersecurity became more of a prevalent issue and challenge for organizations given the world we now live in. Moving into the role of the CISO, tell me a little bit about how that happened. How did you become a CISO?
So I'd started looking more at how to do the cybersecurity across the organization I was in, and then did a second master's part-time online in IT and cybersecurity. Did a course in becoming a data practitioner officer for the GDPR rollout. Then moved into doing ISO 27001 lead implementation for the organization I was in, and then finally did CISP as well. So I'm now a qualified CISP too. So I moved into that area, and then within the company I was in, they had a happy story of being bought and sold, which is obviously the aim of the game. And at the same time, I moved into Onca, my company, full time from there. So to do exactly the same thing I did in the organization I was in, but just hoping that I could help more organizations at the same time.
Yeah, so CISO certainly seems to be the flavor of the day, the Chief Information Security Officer. Tell me a little bit about the differences between a CISO and a vCISO. Let's educate the audience, Kurtis.
Yeah,
Give us a little bit of a background.
So as you said, the CISO is Chief Information Security Officer, and they're typically responsible for all of the cybersecurity strategy and ultimately the top dog in charge for the company's risk register and what's going to be happening from cybersecurity point of view. Quite often it's looked at that, they do everything related to IT and cyber, and that shouldn't necessarily be the case. Most organizations should have a CISO, a DPO, somebody looking specifically after the data protection, and then an IT manager. So usually that's the kind of trifecta you would have within it. Some scenarios you have the IT manager and the DPO reporting to the CISO. Sometimes they're on an even kind of field. But the CISO's primary goal is to be looking at the information security across the company. So particularly looking at cybersecurity risks, how they evolve, what the company's defenses and technologies look like, and what the processes are. A virtual CISO does exactly the same thing, but on a contract basis. So it might be that you are going into a company as a virtual CISO and helping that organization with a specific project. So maybe they want you to come in and do a gap analysis and see quick improvements that they can make to sort things out so that they have a better security posture. It might be that they have an IT manager already and they have a DPO already, but they need additional expertise, but they don't necessarily need to have a full-time CISO. So they might just look at having a part-time virtual CISO instead. And the advantage of that is with the virtual CISO, obviously they typically, like myself, end up being quite fluid across many industries. So it means you kind of get the best, you often get best practice across different industries. So because the vCISO is looking at different areas, it means that they can kind of pick up bits from here and there and tie them into your organization to say, well, actually, this is a different way I've seen it. So that's not to detract from a full-time CISO, but a full-time CISO could also benefit from utilizing a virtual CISO just to come in as a sounding board, because often it can be quite lonely at the top trying to work out all of the various responsibilities you've got. So just hiring in a second pair of eyes just to say, this is where I'm thinking of going and this is why, and somebody else just to kind of look over your shoulder and say, yeah, that's what I would do too. Or, have you considered this? What are we doing for this area? It just means you've got that kind of level of reassurance that you're on the right track.
And the CISO, Kurtis, certainly doesn't come cheap. Given some of the research that we've done recently, looking at, the kind of costs involved in employing a full-time CISO. Naturally, you would only do that if you were a large organization that had a requirement, or an organization that was, at the coalface working quite heavily in a variety of cyber risk challenges. In fact, solar panels, solar winds, in fact, their CISO is currently being prosecuted in America for one of the biggest data protection challenges that SolarWinds had. But looking at costs, Kurtis, associated to a CISO doesn't come cheap. So what would the cost benefits be, Kurtis? Educate us a little bit about what are the differences between me as an organization employing a full-time CISO, or what are the benefits associated to that compared to the likes of utilizing an outsourced virtual CISO, a bit like what Onca offers its clients. Give us some examples, Kurtis, of the costs.
Yeah, no problem. So the probably key one is obviously the difference in the salary. You're not having to budget for a full-time salary, and obviously the benefits of having a full-time job that go along with that. So you don't have to worry about sickness, holidays, or pensions, or anything else that goes along with it. You are only paying the bottom line for what you need and what you use. So if you don't necessarily have the remit to have somebody in-house all the time or for a full-time scope, or if you just need someone to help with a certain project for a couple of months or a couple of years or a couple of weeks, it means that you can just hire someone for what you need as a kind of pay as you go. The other advantage is the training. A virtual CISO, by dint of just being able to be a virtual CISO, must be able to keep up their own training, and you as the client don't have to be paying for that. So you are paying for their experience that they are gaining from multiple industries and organizations as well, rather than when you have an in-house full-time CISO. Obviously, you would need to be making sure that their training was staying up to date and going along to conferences and other areas where you are learning and keeping your knowledge up to date. So whereas a vCISO has to be doing that by dint of making a living and being able to make sure that they are giving the best expertise to their clients. So they have to be able to go out and keep their knowledge up to date and pull that back in. The advantage of the kind of cost benefit for it is you're paying for what you need, but you're still paying for that same level of expertise, so that you're not having to budget for hiring like a junior CISO or maybe someone who hasn't quite cut their teeth yet. You can hire someone that has got the experience, but only for what you need.
Yeah, so I can see the benefit straight away, Kurtis. Obviously, you've had some vast experience there working as a vCISO, and to be able to afford or justify employing somebody full-time at your caliber, that would be quite a significant financial commitment from any organization. But obviously, you've definitely cleared that up for me. Using as a vCISO, the benefits would be you've got that expertise at that level, but you're not having to remunerate them
Exactly.
for the full-time role. So definitely beneficial there. So how do we associate the benefits of a vCISO when it comes to some of the challenges organizations have? Can organizations know that they've got the comfort factor of relying on a vCISO when it gets tough, when situations arise, whether that's through a hack or a breach? Have you got any examples you'd like to share with us, obviously, about some of the experiences you've had?
Yes, there's a few scenarios. So I moved into Onca a few years ago now, full time. So we've got quite a few clients across different industries, and there have been different areas, but kind of similar themes. So the typical things you would expect a CISO or vCISO to be dealing with, like ransomware attacks and cyber fraud, and just general support and strategy that's been needed. There was one case that was quite dramatic within a media company where they had it was before they brought me on board, so they knew of me, but they did the unfortunate thing that everyone is guilty of, and it's entirely understandable, of we don't have the budget for that right now, we'll get to it later, we'll wait till we've got this project coming in, or we'll wait till that invoice is paid and then we'll bring someone on. But unfortunately, they suffered through a case of cyber fraud, where an attacker had hijacked their email account, and rather than targeting the company directly, like through a ransomware account or something, instead they just sat on the account and sat as a watcher and just watched things going back and forth, until the attacker then learned the kind of wording, vernacular, grammar, etc. that the person used, who they spoke to most often, and quite keyly, who invoices were going to. So they waited until a very large invoice, a few £100,000, was sent to a company. And yeah, it was sent to a company, and then they then stopped the emails from being received by the user, which they were able to do just for mailing rules, and they instead started sending their own emails to the company that that received the invoice of my client's client. So unfortunately, that client didn't pick up the phone to check when the person inevitably said, "We've changed our banking details." So the attacker sent them an email from a fake domain saying that they've changed their banking details and the bank details are now this for this invoice. Could you please pay it? Meanwhile, the client had been sending multiple chase-up emails asking, where's the payment for this invoice? What's happening? Likewise, their client had been emailing them to say, hey, we've paid this, etc. But the hacker was sitting in between and manipulating and moving all of the emails back and forth. So neither company had any idea there was an attacker in the middle at all. They then, unfortunately, the client did pay the invoice to the wrong account, and then they tried doing it again to multiple other clients. So the actual invoice was sent in around a December time, when things are typically chaotic and things go unnoticed, and so it wasn't picked up at all until about a month, 6 weeks later, when eventually the director of one company phoned the other one to say, "Where's the money?" And then they said, "What are you talking about? We paid it months ago." So,
my good God.
And yeah, it was a horrible situation, horrible scenario. So they pulled me in to give them some help on anything they could do to try to fight the recovery, and also to work out what had gone on because they weren't aware. So when they brought me in, I then worked out the story, and it's something I had seen before. So the first thing I had to do was boot everybody off of the network because I knew the attacker was still in the system, and then put everybody back in with more secure passwords. And unfortunately, they weren't using MFA, so please make sure you do have MFA switched on because that would have prevented this. So they were already in the system. So managed to get them out, and the genuine reason I believe that the company didn't suffer an even worse fate because they have recovered, and we did get some of the money back through the banks, through the banking systems, but we're still working on the rest. But the main reason was because, fortunately, the CEO of the company, who was the one who was targeted, did not have admin access to the back end, I believe, and the attacker was trying to get admin access in. So that was the fortunate thing. So the two key takeaways there are: make sure you do have MFA switched on. Be aware that just because you're emailing someone, even if it is from a genuine domain, it doesn't necessarily mean it is the right person. Never pay to banking details that have been changed unless you have done a Teams call or an audio call and you are absolutely confident that it is correct. And always try to go to a different contact as well, just to avoid it, particularly with threats of AI coming up. That makes it more difficult. And then the last one, making sure that when things do go wrong, you are quick to respond as quickly as you can.
So there's no question in my mind, Kurtis, if that organization, that media company, had the support or the retained support of a vCISO, they may well have averted this entire situation, which is unfortunate to say the least. So there's definitely food for thought there when you are considering the cost outlay of having a CISO compared to having a vCISO. Obviously, on retainer, there's definitely a great business case there for this particular example. Well, Kurtis, we could talk all day about the CISO and the vCISO. What I do want to touch on with you is that you've recently been appointed as the Chief Executive Officer of the Cyber Centre of Excellence. We've got a few minutes just to talk about that because I do believe there's still a relationship there as a CISO as well. Tell us a little bit about that. How did that come about?
So it came about because the improvement sector, a company called IESE Limited, that's owned by public councils, they're not for profit, and they basically work on improvements across the public authority sector. They get set different missions. So previously they've looked at cost of social care. They've looked at building requirements in different councils, all kinds of different missions that they've then taken on and looked at improvements for. And most recently, it was kind of addressing the risk of cybersecurity attack in public authorities across the UK. So they then approached me and asked me to help put together an advisory board for the Cyber Centre of Excellence and basically create a kind of structured organisation that was just dedicated towards improvements that we can offer in cybersecurity across the public sector. So that came about for us to create a kind of umbrella of protection that goes right down into the community for the whole of the UK. So the main mission is to make the UK the safest place to live, work and play in the digital world. And we're doing that from the advice of a very, very significant advisory board, all leaders within their industries, so that we can then pull together the correct expertise. Because as you know, cybersecurity is such a broad subject. I think people that are kind of outside of the IT and cybersecurity land kind of think it's just one topic, and people saying, make your password stronger and turn off MFA. They don't realize that there's cybersecurity laws, operational technology, individual components for training. GDPR is its whole own caveat. AI is obviously its own area. Phishing simulations, ransomware, application control, the list goes on. So what we've done within the CCOE is pull together leaders within each of these individual sectors and identify exactly what it is that we can do, so that we can help the public sector to improve their cybersecurity, and focusing in on data, people, technology, and process, and see what improvements can be made in those individual parts.
Yeah, and I believe you're wearing two hats there as well, because you're still giving advice as the CISO as well, the virtual CISO. So there's multiple benefits there to the members of the Cyber Centre of Excellence. Kurtis, we could talk on forevermore. As you well know, we both know how to talk. Kurtis Toy, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Ladies and gents, if you like what you've seen, if you like what you heard, please press that subscribe button. You will find Kurtis's contact details at the end of this podcast. All that remains for me to say is, Kurtis Toy, let's talk cyber. Let's keep the conversations going. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, Tommy. It's a pleasure to be here.